In the boxing match, I suddenly became weak, had 8 ribs broken, blood coming from my nose and mouth, suffering a devastating defeat. Joe Warner helped disperse the reporters and took me to the hospital while crying. On the way, in my hazy consciousness, I overheard her conversation with her best friend. Warner, isn't it too cruel that you drugged Fu Ming and bribed his opponent to hurt him deliberately? After all, this match was very important. Joe Warner sneered. Precisely because it's important, I need to bring Fu Ming down and ensure Fong Hao wins the championship. Take the left road. I've arranged some thugs there to make sure everything goes as planned. She kissed my lips affectionately. Once this is over, I'll make it up to Fu Ming and be with him properly. Ching Ching, take the national security road, don't take this alley. Joe Warner spoke anxiously, as if hiding something. Fu Ming is severely injured. Taking the shortcut to the hospital would be faster. Warner, what's wrong with you? I have arranged thugs and reporters on Guan Road. Don't be stubborn, just listen to me. Tong Ching Ching's brows furrowed involuntarily, but her hands didn't stop as she turned the steering wheel towards Guan Road. Isn't all this enough? How much more suffering do you want Fu Ming to endure? Joe Warner massaged her temples, her voice filled with helplessness. Fu Ming is too strong. These injuries are nothing to him. Once he recovers, Fong Hao still won't be his match. I must make sure Fu Ming can never pursue boxing again. Only then will Fong Hao have nothing to worry about. Tong Ching Ching bit her lip, wanting to speak, but holding back. But Joe Warner didn't want to hear any more. She caressed my face with her hand, her gaze full of affection. Meanwhile, my stomach was churning with nausea. I never imagined Joe Warner would love Fong Hao this much. Even though he was already married, she still spared no effort to pave the way for him. She was even willing to hurt my dreams and my body. She knew well that I had prepared for 3 full years for this boxing championship, shedding countless sweat and blood during that time. When I think about how her eyes were filled with endless love every time she handed me water, while secretly plotting how to destroy me behind my back, my entire heart aches endlessly. A tear rolled down from the corner of my eye, dropping onto Warner Zhou's hand. She trembled for a moment and held me while crying out in pain. Fu Ming, are your injuries too painful? Don't worry, we'll be at the hospital soon. With Warner here, I won't let you suffer any more harm. Hearing this, I laughed bitterly in my heart. Aren't you the one who has caused me the greatest harm? Who are you trying to fool with this pretense of deep affection? I endured the pain and opened my eyes. Joe Warner's face was already streaked with tear. South as she leaned close to me, kissing my lips regardless of the blood and mud on my body. The more I once longed for this kiss, the more I now despise it. I pretended to cough and turned my face away. Joe Warner immediately opened another bottle of water, feeding me sip by sip, while her other hand gently patted my back, afraid that I might choke. She was always like this, gentle as water in everything she did. I used to think her gentleness belonged only to me, but now I see it was just her means to help Fong Hao. After 3 years, I finally woke up from the dream, realizing this lukewarm water nearly drowned me. The car suddenly slammed on its brakes. The water in Joe Warner's hand slipped and fell to the ground. A trace of irritation crept into her delicate features. Ching Ching, how are you driving? What if Fu Ming gets hurt again? Tong Ching Ching knew it was her cue to act, and her eyes flickered with guilt. Warner, we can't go any further, someone's blocking the car. Following Tong Ching Ching's gaze, a group of fierce-looking people were standing in front of the car window. The door handle had been opened by someone at some point. I was grabbed by my collar and yanked out. Joe Warner screamed heart-rendingly, desperately trying to stop those bandits, but was still thrown into the car and had the door locked. Looking at her devastated expression as she kept banging on the car window. If I didn't know the truth, I would have been completely convinced by her acting. The group of thugs claimed to be friends of the competitor I had fought against in the recent match. You took excessive stimulants to win the match, which caused you to go into shock temporarily, yet you let my brother take the blame. As a man, how can you be so shameless? I was thrown to the ground, completely unable to move. In the past, these people wouldn't have been a match for me at all. But I'm too severely injured now. The bruised blood in my chest cavity is flowing back and blocking my throat. I cough violently and spit out fresh blood, unable to speak a complete sentence. The bandits, seeing this, kicked my stomach twice more without hesitation. I curled up on the ground in pain like a shrimp, my whole body convulsing in agony. The leader took out a folding knife and forcefully severed the tendons in my hands and feet. Soon, excruciating pain shot through my hands and feet as blood gushed out. Before long, a group of reporters appeared out of nowhere and rushed to my side. Mr. Fu, is it true that you collapsed because you overdosed on performance-enhancing drugs? As a professional boxer, don't you know that using banned substances in competition is against the rules? This shows disrespect not only to the arena, but also to the spirit of boxing. Based on your behavior today, can we reasonably assume that your previous victories were achieved through the use of performance-enhancing drugs? Mr. Fu, aren't you even slightly ashamed of winning championships through such despicable means? A thin layer of sweat appeared on my forehead, and I was in so much pain that my teeth were chattering, but I couldn't say a word. But then I realized, these people don't need my explanation at all. They were all performing so smoothly, having rehearsed according to Zhou Wanner's instructions. Sure enough, the car door suddenly opened. Zhou Wanner rushed towards me, screaming. While angrily denouncing the unscrupulous media, she and Tong Qingqing helped me up from the ground and got me into the car, then quickly drove to the hospital. Along the way, Zhou Wanner sobbed breathlessly several times and made emotional declarations to me. Fu Ming, even if the whole world slanders you, I'll stand by your side. I believe you're innocent. Don't worry, I will never leave you, and I'll stay with you forever. The gentle words cut through my heart like a dull knife, slice by slice. Zhou Wanner, your acting is truly remarkable. After several hours of emergency treatment, I finally regained consciousness. My entire body was wrapped in bandages, and Zhou Wanner had already vanished without a trace. Feeling the urge to use the bathroom, I struggled to get up. After arduously making my way to the door with the help of a chair, I heard a familiar voice from outside. Wanner, the doctors have already said Fu Ming will never be able to box again, so why did you post those fake urine test results online? If the public finds out about this, Fu Ming's reputation that he built up punch by punch over the years will be completely ruined in an instant. Can you really bear to do that? Tong Qingqing's voice was filled with confusion. Zhou Wanner let out an almost imperceptible sigh. You don't understand. My love for him is so deep that I must eliminate anything that could possibly threaten Fang Hao's position. Fu Ming doesn't need reputation. Having me is enough for him. After hearing this, I had no strength left to support myself. Holding back my tears, I crawled back to bed. It felt like thousands of ants were gnawing at my heart, and even the cicadas chirping outside seemed to be mocking my misplaced affection. My phone vibrated. Dad, I want to come home. Since this love has already turned into a blade that has left me covered in wounds, there's no need for me to keep holding on so tightly anymore. Just as I hung up the phone, Zhou Wanner pushed open the door and entered. Perhaps she hadn't expected me to wake up so soon, as a trace of guilty unease flashed across her face. But she quickly composed herself, putting on a worried expression once again. Fu Ming, you must be in terrible pain. Don't worry, I've called the most professional doctor to treat you. You'll recover soon. As she spoke, her hand brushed across my brow bone, eyes, and nose. Her gaze was worried and filled with unease. I slowly turned my head, and her hand slipped from my face. Then she became anxious again. Fu Ming, don't lose heart. You'll surely recover to normal in the future. I've already set the wedding date. Even if you're in a wheelchair then, I still want to have our wedding ceremony. I didn't want to keep acting in this fake show of deep affection with her. I just wanted to leave quickly. But worried that exposing everything would ruin things, I could only nod slightly. Joy spread across Zhou Wanner's face as she gave me a light peck on the lips. She took me back to her home, saying that recovering at home would be better. However, as soon as we entered the door, I looked up to see Fang Hao. He was shirtless, with water droplets still visible on his abs, and he was drinking from the water cup I had bought for Zhou Wanner. Though it was Zhou Wanner's home, he acted as familiar as if he were the master of the house. Fu Ming, don't overthink it. I asked Fang Hao to come here. He's a professional boxer, just like you. I thought having him help with your rehabilitation at home might be better for your recovery. Zhou Wanner explained while shifting her steps. As soon as she finished speaking, her feet unconsciously carried her to Fang Hao's side. When their eyes met, Fang Hao immediately turned his head away. In that instant, displeasure and bitterness crept across Zhou Wanner's brow. She was like a flower waiting for spring to arrive, full of anticipation and longing. I gave a self-mocking smile and prepared to go upstairs with my crutches. But before I could take even half a step, Fang Hao spoke up. Fu Ming, even if you can't box in the ring anymore, is that any reason to treat me this way? Don't let your physical disability twist your mind too. The air instantly froze, and the surroundings became so quiet you could hear a pin drop. I turned my head mechanically, only to be met with Fang Hao's cruel smile. If it weren't for him, how could I have fallen into such a state? Until this incident happened, Fang Hao wasn't even an opponent worth my attention. But now, the tides have completely turned. The man who once wore a golden belt and raised his fists to the sky shouting in triumph will never return. Upon seeing this, Zhou Wanner showed no guilt, her brows furrowing instead. Fu Ming, you're being really impolite. You can't compete in the boxing championship anymore, but Fang Hao still has to continue. Yet when he learned about your injury, he rushed over and readily agreed to help with your rehabilitation. How can you be so cold to someone who's helping you? You're being too ungrateful. A bitter feeling rose in my heart. I'd like to ask if he rushed over here for me, or for you. But what's the point of arguing now? My heart is dead. Nothing matters to me anymore. I swallowed hard and spoke with difficulty. It's my fault. I just Came back from the hospital, and I'm still feeling weak. I don't have much energy and want to go back to my room to rest. I apologize for not being a better host. Only then did Fong Hao nod with satisfaction. When Zhou Wan'er heard that I wasn't feeling well, she immediately switched back to a concerned demeanor. Let me help you to your room. I was careless. You just had surgery not long ago. How could I let you stand for so long? I didn't refuse her help, silently accepting it like a stranger's charity. After lying back in bed and drinking the water Zhou Wan'er poured for me, I fell into a deep sleep. In my dream, I once again collapsed helplessly on the ground, powerless, as they abused and beat me. I suddenly woke up with sharp pains in my stomach. Supporting myself with crutches, I rushed to the bathroom and vomited for quite a while, as if trying to purge everything I had eaten yesterday. Just as I was gazing blankly at my haggard reflection in the mirror, moans came from outside the room. I trembled all over. How dare they do it at home? Squeezing my eyes shut, I crept to the door and quietly opened a small crack. How dare you? This is your living room, and Fu Ming is sleeping inside. Fong Hao impatiently tugged at Zhou Wan'er's clothes. Zhou Wan'er's face was full of pleasure. I drugged him. He's sound asleep now. Wan'er, you've done so much for me. I don't know how to repay you. Fong Hao suddenly lowered his voice as his tongue traced down Zhou Wan'er's shivering spine. Her upper body was exposed. Beneath her was the soaked white wedding dress. This wedding dress was one I had spent most of my savings on to give to her when I proposed. She had loved this wedding dress for so long, and when she received it, tears sparkled in her eyes. Wearing a wedding dress and going crazy with you. At least I've entered the marriage hall with you once in this life. Fong Hao, don't waste this precious time. Zhou Wan'er turned back eagerly, clinging to Fong Hao's neck as they passionately kissed, their lips making soft sounds. I closed the door gap and shut my eyes in despair. Back in bed, thinking about all the moments I spent with Zhou Wan'er over the years, it was simply a joke. Her deep affection, her gentleness. It was all a calculated move, just for today, just to help Fong Hao win the championship. She finally got what she wanted. Tears fell down my cheeks as I sat awake all night with my eyes open. Until the early dawn, the door was pushed open. Fong Hao walked in. With a smug smile on his face, he said, "Not feeling good watching your girlfriend putting on an intimate show with someone else, huh?" My pupils suddenly contracted as I looked at him in disbelief. Actually, you know well in your heart that Wan'er doesn't love you at all. She's with you only because of me. You bought that wedding dress, right? Quite expensive, but the quality. Why wasn't good? I've already torn it to pieces. Fong Hao pressed on relentlessly, his lips curling into a sneer. With just one word from me, Wan'er would throw herself into my arms immediately. Fu Ming, you're nothing but a complete joke. Each word pierced like a dagger. I clenched my teeth and threw a punch with all my might, but could no longer reach his face. He gave a light chuckle, then bit his own lip until it bled, leaving a winding trail of blood drops down his chin. Immediately after, he started shouting, "Fu Ming, I was kindly trying to help you recover. Why are you reacting so violently? It's not like I'm the one who made you end up like this." His voice boomed like thunder, causing people outside the room to rush over with hurried footsteps. When Zhou Wan'er arrived at the house and saw the wound on Fong Hao's lips, her brows instantly furrowed, and her beautiful face was filled with disgust. "Fu Ming, you've really disappointed me. Just because you've become like this, do you want all boxers in the world to end up like you? Fong Hao still needs to compete. He's not a useless person like you." My heart shattered into pieces, and the taste of blood filled my throat. Zhou Wan'er supported Fong Hao, anxiously wanting to take him to the hospital. Before leaving, she slammed the door shut, as if never wanting to see the person inside again. After being stunned for a long while, a desolate smile appeared on my face. The phone on the bed vibrated. My ride had arrived. Even as I walked out the door, I didn't look back once. Zhou Wan'er, now that our love has scattered, may we never meet again in this life. At the final moment when Zhou Wan'er left with Fong Hao, her heart suddenly skipped a beat. She looked up the stairs, but there was no movement. Her heart became uneasy, and suddenly she had the thought that if she left this time, she might never see Fu Ming again. She quickly shook her head. It couldn't be. 3 years ago, Zhou Ming fell in love with her at first sight, and for the entire 3 years, he would have given her his heart and soul. Fu Ming wouldn't leave her, and besides, in his current condition, where could he go? Zhou Wan'er finally calmed herself down. She planned to bring Fu Ming his favorite vanilla pudding on her way back, thinking that eating something sweet might make him feel better. With this in mind, Zhou Wan'er finally turned around, intending to continue taking Fu Ming to the hospital. In the consultation room, the doctor told Zhou Wan'er that the wound on Fu Ming's mouth couldn't have been inflicted by someone who had just been seriously injured, but rather seemed to be self-inflicted by biting. Zhou Wan'er felt somewhat remorseful, realizing she had misunderstood Fu Ming. But when she frowned at Fong Hao, the culprit showed no sign of regret at all. Instead, he playfully stuck out his tongue and teasingly winked at her. "Sud. Unli, Zhou Wan'er felt irritated. She had gone through all this trouble, even making Fu Ming unhappy, only to end up being played by Fang Hao. She grabbed her bag and turned to leave, but in the hospital corridor, Fang Hao inappropriately grabbed her and planted a deep kiss on her lips. The kiss lingered for a long while. After several attempts to break free, Zhou Wan'er finally managed to step back and push him away. Before she could scold him, Fang Hao lowered his head coyly, asking Zhou Wan'er to watch him practice boxing. Zhou Wan'er actually had no interest at all at this moment, but since she hadn't figured out how to face Fu Ming when she got home, she let Fang Hao lead her away. In the boxing ring, Fang Hao was like a peacock displaying its feathers, focused only on showing off his refined jawline or the muscle lines on his upper arms with each punch, without any regard for boxing techniques. How could someone box in such a pretentious way? The image of Fu Ming boxing suddenly appeared in Zhou Wan'er's mind. His style was clean and efficient, each punch striking vital points, without any intention to show off. Yet every movement was incredibly cool. She had watched him for 3 whole years, never tiring of it, but never had she felt so restless as she did today. A sense of regret welled up in her heart. Fu Ming would never be able to box again from now on. Her nose stung with emotion as she began to question whether what she did was right or wrong. Before she could think further, a sweaty, damp towel reeking of body odor was thrown onto her head. She removed it and looked up at its owner. "Baby, get me a clean one." Fu Ming leaned on the railing, whistling at her, drawing many onlookers around, as if she, Zhou Wan'er, was just some girl Fang Hao brought to show off. Zhou Wan'er felt both angry and hurt. It wasn't like this before when she used to come to the boxing gym with Fu Ming. When she was hungry, there were snacks. When thirsty, mineral water. When tired, a small stool. And Fu Ming never even let her touch the towels herself. Worried she might get bored, Fu Ming would come down after every few rounds to play small games with her or tell jokes that made her laugh heartily. He would solemnly introduce her to his boxing brothers, making sure no one showed her the slightest disrespect. Unlike now, when several men passed by and cast sidelong glances at Zhou Wan'er's chest, Fang Hao ignored it all, even wearing a proud expression on his face. Zhou Wan'er missed Fu Ming deeply, so much that her heart ached. For past 3 years, Fu Ming had been meticulous in taking care of and loving her. How careful must he have been? Zhou Wan'er finally understood clearly. She loved Fu Ming, but had also wronged him. Fortunately, they were still young, and she had plenty of time to make amends. She had already set the wedding date. After the ceremony, they would be legitimate husband and wife, and from then on, she would never associate with Fang Hao again. Lost in these thoughts, she tossed aside the smelly towel and walked out of the boxing gym. Seeing her leave, Fang Hao lost interest in boxing too. He jumped down from the ring and chased after her. Before Fang Hao could say anything, Zhou Wan'er's phone rang. "Wan'er, quick, check your phone. Someone uploaded a video of you and Fang Hao kissing at the hospital to the internet." Tong Qingqing's words made Zhou Wan'er's mind go blank, as if it had exploded. Her first thought was of Fu Ming. If Fu Ming were to see this, how disappointed and upset would he be? Fang Hao was anxiously jumping up and down beside her, repeatedly asking Zhou Wan'er what they should do. Zhou Wan'er didn't answer a single word, but hurriedly called Fu Ming, planning to tell him not to look at his phone all day. Fu Ming would listen to her, Zhou Wan'er thought. However, the call wouldn't go through. A bad feeling crept into Zhou Wan'er's heart. Could it be that Fu Ming had already seen it? She rushed into her car, ignoring Fang Hao as he knocked on the window, and drove straight home with her foot on the gas pedal. The house was quiet. Everything was as usual. She stepped lightly on the floor as she went upstairs, but stopped at the bedroom door. If Fu Ming had really seen the video, how could she explain? She just needed to tell him that Fang Hao had forcibly kissed her. Fu Ming loves me so much, he will surely forgive me. Zhou Wan'er gently rubbed her chest a few times to calm herself down, then opened the door slightly and called out softly several times. There was no response. She felt delighted, thinking he might be asleep. However, when she fully opened the door, she found the room empty, with only bedding on the bed. The person she had been thinking about was gone, and even his crutches were leaning against the bed. Without his crutches, where could Fu Ming go? Zhou Wan'er became anxious and started calling out loudly, but still received no response. By now, her phone was being bombarded with calls from people at the company. She had to temporarily stop searching for Fu Ming and drive to the company instead, while instructing her subordinates from the car to look for Fu Ming. Just as she entered the company entrance, a woman came up to her and slapped her hard across the face. It was Jiang Riyue, Fang Hao's wife. Several years ago, the Jiang and Fang families had arranged a marriage, and Fang Hao had reluctantly married Jiang Riyue. Fang Hao always complained to Zhou Wan'er about Jiang Riyue's lack of understanding for his career, thinking boxing had no future, and said only Zhou Wan'er was his soulmate and true confidant. However, there had never been any news of marital problems between Fang Hao and Jiang Riyue, and they always maintained a respectful relationship in front of the Cameras. Now that the video of Zhou Wan'er and Fang Hao kissing has suddenly appeared online, if Jiang Riyue is this angry, how must Fu Ming feel, who has always deeply loved her? Zhou Wan'er didn't dare to imagine how heartbroken Fu Ming would be when he learned about all this. Was this the reason why he left home? She felt a lump in her throat and a tear rolled down her cheek. Only now did she understand the bitterness and pain Fu Ming felt whenever she took Fang Hao's side in front of him. Jiang Riyue refused to let the matter rest, telling reporters about how shameless Zhou Wan'er and Fang Hao were. Zhou Wan'er didn't defend herself anymore, while Fang Hao kept shouting beside her, eagerly trying to shift all blame onto Zhou Wan'er. Facing the reporters, he attempted to make excuses repeatedly. It was Zhou Wan'er who seduced me. She forced herself on me with a kiss. I had nothing to do with it. I love my wife dearly. Fang Hao's shamelessness made Zhou Wan'er finally see his true colors. Zhou Wan'er began to laugh at her own foolishness, for hurting the one who loved her most because of such a worthless person. She shed tears in front of the cameras, saying she no longer wanted to be entangled in these matters. She just wanted to find Fu Ming, apologize to him, not asking for forgiveness, but only seeking a chance to make amends and let Fu Ming know that she loved him too. Jiang Riyue didn't give Fang Hao any chance to make a scene. She directly shared a video clip with the reporters. It showed Zhou Wan'er in her wedding dress having an illicit encounter with Fang Hao in her living room. The explicit nature and shocking content of the footage left everyone speechless. Now Fang Hao can no longer claim that Zhou Wan'er seduced him. In the video, he was clearly the one taking the initiative. The Fang family had always relied on the Jiang family. Now that Fang Hao has been kicked out by Jiang Riyue, and after someone posted online the evidence of how he and Zhou Wan'er collaborated to torment Fu Ming and fabricated Fu Ming's urine test records to falsely accuse him of using stimulants, both their reputations were completely ruined, while Fu Ming was finally cleared of the false charges. Whenever the boxing community remembers Fu Ming, this vanished boxing talent, they both regret his disappearance and curse Fang Hao and Zhou Wan'er, that despicable couple. Fang Hao ended up in misery. He wasn't even that skilled at boxing, but had made many enemies from participating in underground fights. Now, without any backing and with his notorious reputation, all those he had bullied before came looking for revenge, beating him half to death. With a crippled leg and a broken arm, he could never box again. Due to her infamous reputation, Zhou Wan'er caused Zhou Group's stock to plummet, losing several major collaborations. Even He Group, which had already signed a contract with her, suddenly backed out, willing to pay the breach of contract penalty to terminate the agreement, cutting off Zhou Group's funding chain. Without operating capital and having lost public trust, Zhou Group quickly collapsed, and Zhou Wan'er became a woman scorned by everyone on the streets. But she didn't care about any of this, and used what little savings she had left to hire a private detective, hoping he could help find Fu Ming. I scrolled through the news on my phone while taking a sip of coffee. My father sat across from me, calmly reviewing the contracts with He Group and Jiang Group. He had offered 10 times the amount to poach He Group's cooperation from Zhou Group, and also sent evidence to Jiang Riyue, indicating that if she agreed to cooperate, the Fu family would be willing to work with her, an offer Jiang Riyue naturally couldn't resist. My father did all this just to make Fang Hao and Zhou Wan'er lose everything. Those surveillance videos were your... Yes, it was me. My father interrupted my question with an imposing manner. For my father, it was certainly easy to retrieve the surveillance footage from the hospital. As for the cameras in Zhou Wan'er's home, since they were connected to the internet, they were also easy to hack. What? Are you feeling sorry for her? My father looked at me with disappointment. After what she did to you, don't tell me you still have feelings for her. A few years ago, when I was making a name for myself in the fighting arena, my father called and said I'd had enough fun, asking if I wanted to return home to inherit the family business. To be honest, I had considered going back to help my father manage the business at that time. Although my trophy cabinet was full, I was still missing the crown from the National Online Championship. This trophy carried immense prestige, one that many boxers could only dream of. Besides, I had already submitted my registration form, and giving up at that point would have left me with regret. Moreover, that was the day I met Zhou Wan'er. She was tall and slender with a sweet face. When she entered the boxing arena, she was like a startled bird, unable to find her bearings, blinking and looking around, appearing both adorable and comical. I was captivated by her and accidentally caught her gaze. In that moment, my heart fluttered like spring water, like a deer running wild. Her alluring eyes suddenly became bright. At that moment, I made up my mind that I wanted to be with her for all lifetimes. After winning the crown in the online championship, I would take her home to meet my parents. For many years after, I believed that, like me, she had fallen in love at first sight. But after learning the truth and thinking back, it wasn't so. I was just the prey she had finally found. After meeting her, I decisively refused my father's wishes, vowing to win back the boxing championship crown and then proudly bring Zhou Wan'er home. Yet I never expected it would end like this. Of course not. I'm not a masochist. I just didn't expect you would strike. I finished explaining, turned off my phone, and helped my father review the contract. You're my only son. How could I not care when you're being bullied like this? Seeing that I took the initiative to look at the contract, my father stopped questioning me and instead reminded me to familiarize myself with the company's business so I could take over once I recovered. Your mother and I are waiting to go on vacation and enjoy our retirement. You need to take over soon. My father's expression softened a bit when he mentioned my mother. It was because I grew up watching my parents' loving relationship that I wanted to find my one true love for life. Now that I've had such a big setback, I might as well focus on my career. A few months later, with the help of professional doctors and nurses, my body had almost fully recovered. Except for intense activities like boxing, I could move around normally, run and jump. Meanwhile, I had become quite familiar with the company's business operations. The night before I planned to start working at the company, my father showed me a video. Fong Hao was in the video. He didn't know why he suddenly got involved in gambling. His limping figure wandered around the gambling house. He used up his already meager savings as gambling money, and not only lost everything, but his gambling addiction persisted, even leading him to take out high-interest loans. I know this gambling house. It's run by an uncle who watched me grow up. His men lured Fong Hao into borrowing more and more loans until he could never repay them. Fong Hao begged on his knees for a reduction in the loans, but no one paid any attention to him. In this place, without money, you might as well be dead. He was beaten up again, and his remaining healthy arm and leg were also covered in wounds. He was thrown into a garbage heap, with flies buzzing around in the air. He lay motionless, his fate unknown. My father smiled knowingly. This is what happens to those who dare to bully a child of the Fu family. Then he looked at me with hopeful eyes, wishing I could break free from the past and soar in my growth. I nodded firmly, indicating that I would never let him down. I didn't ask about Zhou Wan'er, knowing her fate wouldn't be good given my father's methods. Once I loved her like life itself, later I hated her to the bone. Everything was wrong from the very beginning. While passing by a playing TV, a news report caught my attention. Around 9:20 a.m. on March 17th, a woman jumped from a bridge, and after 3 hours of recovery efforts. For some reason, I had a vague feeling it was her. Looking up, the deceased woman was indeed Zhou Wan'er. Her body was covered in scars, one eye was blind, and her once radiant beauty was gone, replaced by a weathered and aged appearance. I didn't know what she had been through, nor did I want to care. At the spot where she drowned herself, the police found a wedding ring and a suicide note. Looking at the familiar pattern on the wedding ring, I knew clearly it was the one I proposed to her with. And in her suicide note, she filled it with Fu Ming's name. My heart remained calm, just like countless viewers watching this news. After a brief glance, I strode away swiftly. The morning